Hey, folks, Zach Oshman here, IU Insider, Indianapolis Star, Mike Nisley, Bloomington Herald Times. Not sure how that video got added. Forgive us if you saw that. I'm assuming you did. This is not the scorers table. This is Mind Your Banners. Talking Mind Your Banners post-game, to be specific. Talking about Maryland 79, Indiana 78. We'll talk to Mike first about the game, and then we will kind of look at the wider landscape because I think it's inescapable at this point. To the neutral, I think one of the best games Indiana's played this season, certainly in the Big Ten. Back and forth. I think 9 lead changes. Maryland kind of threatened to pull away a couple times in the second half. Indiana clawed it back, had a 5-point lead with a little over 3 minutes left. Not a lot of fouls, not a lot of turnovers. Two teams were 19 of 41 for 3. And if Indiana had been able to pull this out, you would have felt like, especially given what Maryland did midweek at Illinois, this was, this would have kind of almost immediately become Indiana's best win of the season. And instead it winds up feeling like, maybe the most deflating. Maryland made its last 4 shots. Indiana missed the front end of a 1-on-1 with a 2-point lead. And I think 22 seconds left, something like that. Maryland hits kind of a scramble drill 3 when Indiana's was told to foul, didn't foul because they had a foul to give. And then Indiana's last 2 inbounds plays, out of bounds plays were just kind of a mess. As games go, this one's a bit of a gut punch.
Yeah, it's hard to know where to start. I still think this is a team that's just does not. I don't know if it's coaching. I don't know if it's this group of talent they have uniquely just doesn't necessarily fit as well together, like a consistent level. And they're capable of, you felt like, man, this game they could be just lose by 20 points as Maryland hit a series of 3-pointers because they weren't guarding, very well. And then it's like, man, you see all the talent they have, and this team's going to actually pull out a win. But there's no level for this team, and it's been that way all season. It's been that way for most of their players, like Miles Rice. First half, his most notable play is he tries to hit Rodney Rice off the dribble, travels, and immediately gets pulled from the floor because Mike Woods is frustrated with them. Didn't have a field goal in the first half. Has 14 points in the second half, 3 3-pointers. Team is so much better when he's looking for a shot and is in rhythm, is going, but he can't do that for long periods. The last sort of 5 games, or 3 games, it's been that way. Had more turnovers than assists. And you kind of look up and down the roster. It's like for every 3-pointer Mackenzie Mbako gave you, he gave up one to Miguel. What was his first name? I don't know. Selton Miguel. And it's just like this team can't find a level, and I think that's where you see that they can probably play with anybody, and they have, other than that Illinois game where they just was never in it. But you could see why the fans are so maddeningly frustrated because they have the talent to compete, and they just have not been able to put it together to sort of close out games or sort of stay in games because you spot them 10 points, and that's sort of the difference here with all these 3-pointers, 8 in the second half. And that's sort of, to me, what this whole season's been about, that these ups and downs, even just on the sort of micro level with all the different players that you've just seen, just like these just swings, and they can't seem to level out.
And it felt a little bit like, especially in the second half today, Indiana was maybe leveling some of that out. Anthony Leo, Indiana was making a lot of the winning plays in the last 5 minutes. It was getting key rebounds.
But it shouldn't take to the last.
But my point is, it's at the end of the day, it's very much, up until Maryland opens that first 10-point lead, I don't think either team had led by more than 5 points. Correct. It was a very back and forth game most of the afternoon. Maryland pulls away once, Indiana kind of pulls back, then Maryland pulls away again. Then Indiana hits a 20-7 run. And that's the stretch where Malik Renew is finally kind of – that was the first time I think we saw, like, shades of healthy, sharp Malik Renew. Obviously, listen, you got to –
He's not 100%.
No,
I don't want to blame this on him.
No.
And I know you're not, but I just to point out, like, he has an excuse for sort of his inconsistency.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is that was the moment when it looked like Indiana was finding some of that, where he's finally sharp enough. He's bullying not Julian Reese, Derek Queen, who's obviously bigger than him, but just clearly not able to defend a post player of that sort of experience and that skill yet. Ballo held his own, I thought, really well today against, obviously, Maryland has a big front court. You talk about Miles Rice making some big threes in that stretch. Anthony Leal has the 2 layups and fouls with the bonus free throws in that stretch. Indiana's getting, I think McKenzie and Baco had a couple tough rebounds. It felt like Indiana was making the winning plays at quote unquote winning time in the game. And so you felt a little bit like, against a good opponent, this would have been, I think, probably Indiana's first win against a likely NCAA tournament team. Against a good opponent in a back and forth game, when it was time to really kind of stand up, Indiana was the team making the plays. And so you felt a little bit like, without wanting to place too much weight on one game, like maybe something was sort of breaking through a little bit for Indiana. And then the last 30, 40 seconds, it all just.
But I would say it's sort of like we talked, I mean, even in this room, actually, after that 5-game win streak, it looked like they were breaking through, and then they completely fell off the cliff. And it's just like they've never been able to figure it out on a game-to-game basis, on a longer. It's just a team that can look like they could compete with anybody, but then at the same moment, and when we talk about that last play, looks like they maybe never have played basketball before. I mean, just completely lost. And we should talk about that last possession, because I thought that was kind of what the focus of a lot of that media session was today.
Well, I think that we should talk about the last 2 possessions, because the first one, the Maryland possession, it clearly irked Mike Woodson.
Okay, so
only had 5
Maryland's last possession and Indiana.
Gillespie gets the drive, almost loses his dribble. Assembly Hall wanted a travel. I'm not sure it was a travel. But at that point, when Gillespie's pulled, that's the perfect moment to foul a player like that.
Yes.
He's pulled up, he's in trouble. You just swipe your arm down across him. You take the foul and you make Maryland.
He was stalling down at one point.
Yeah,
if you follow him, you waste a couple more seconds.
You make Maryland, start the whole possession over. Instead, it winds up getting kicked out, I think, to Julian Reese, who finds Rodney. I think it was Rice, wasn't it? It was Rice, who steps into a 3. That's what gives Maryland the lead. And then I guess I'll set it up and get your thoughts. Indiana brings it up, calls timeout, gets side out in front of its bench, inbounds the ball to Malik Renew. I think it was Queen against Renew, pokes the ball away out of bounds. At that point, Indiana recognizes Maryland has gone zone and calls something that will basically try to get Miles Rice off a switch, because the bigs will be passing players back and forth. What I think they were basically trying to do was get Rice isolated against a big where he could take him one-on-one and either get fouled or, get a shot, because he's just so much quicker and more athletic in kind of an open floor situation than a big is. It did not wind up working out that way. Rice talked about how he felt like the 2 subs between the 2 inbounds, Luke Goody and McKenzie Baco, came in, Umar Ballo and Anthony Leal came out. He said maybe that crossed Indiana up a little bit, adding 2 new players, but not being able, they didn't have any more timeouts to kind of refresh. Rice said that was on me for not getting everybody organized. I'm the point guard, one way or the other. It just didn't work.
Yeah. But I mean, with symptoms of like a larger, just this team, lacked the poise in the moment. And obviously, Mike Woodson's frustrated about not taking the foul. Rice was frustrated sort of, and then kind of talked about it and came back to it and said, well, it was my fault because like he said, there was confusion after the substitutions.
Yeah.
And that was kind of a part of the problem. Mike Woodson said he didn't run the play even right, though. He was supposed to come out and he just stayed in the corner and then just heaved up the shot instead of trying to move off that attempt at, the screens. And so there was kind of a lot of, not finger pointing necessarily, but just a lot of blame to go around. And you're left with this idea that like this team just, wilted at the moment where, the crowd, as much as this crowd turned on IU the last time they were here, that was the loudest this gym's been all season.
Yes.
And they had their back. I think
I tweeted something with about like 3 minutes left that I said, like, if Maryland wins this, they're going to earn it because Assembly Hall is up.
That was a true challenging road environment for
Yeah,
Maryland, especially in the last final 10 minutes when the game was as competitive as it was. And just sort of, I think fans are going to be rightly frustrated that, this isn't November when this has happened. This isn't the Battle for Atlantis where they struggle. This isn't a non-conference game where you're still integrating the pieces. This is now a couple days away from February, and you can't execute basic end of game sort of situations, and it's just sort of symptomatic, I feel, of like this larger problems that this team has right now.
Yeah, I mean it's getting late early, and I don't know if it's like I don't know if everything is needs to be assigned to some sort of symptom of the wider issue so much as basically, and I would say this a little bit about the Northwestern game too. Obviously, it's not as close down to the wire as this one is, but Indiana talked so much like a team coming out of the Illinois game, like, hey, we're not going to stand for this. We're going to get this right. We're going to fix this. We're going to pull this together. Then they go to Ohio State, a tough win. Ohio State's not great, but Ohio State backs that up by going and winning at Purdue. So that's, kind of endorses the idea that Indiana's, had a good moment in Columbus. And then now it's 2 games in a row where it feels like Indiana's just when Indiana kind of gives itself that platform to go get a valuable win.
Yeah.
It just sort of slips away again. And if Indiana had won these last 2 games, and we'll talk bigger picture in a second, Indiana would be 16-5. Indiana would be 7-3 in the Big Ten at the halfway turn. They would be, again, this would, I think these would both be quad 1 wins. I think Northwestern's still top 75.
They'd be in a spot that would be enviable of a lot of teams that are below them in the Big Ten. You know what I'm saying?
Yes. Well, they'd be in a spot that would be enviable of a lot of teams around them in the NCAA tournament conversation. Yeah. They'd have some road wins. They'd have quad 1 wins. Again, this would be, I think, their first win against a likely NCAA tournament team. Penn State might get there, but Maryland, I think, is likely to get there. You would feel like coming out of that Iowa-Illinois, sort of week, like Indiana had accomplished a little bit of that and had gotten its feet under the table a little bit more, especially with the games coming up. And this is where I think we have to zoom out. You can't if you keep missing opportunities at a certain point, that's going to come to be what defines your season. And Indiana had kind of the opportunity maybe to learn from Atlantis. Seemed like they did, but then Nebraska. It seemed like they took something out of Nebraska 5 games in a row. Then boom, a really disastrous week against Iowa and Illinois. Then they followed that with a good win at Ohio State. But now they've let back-to-back games that were arguably very winnable at key points in the last 8 minutes of the game or closer to the end slip away, including one today where, they're even as close as up to inside 30 seconds shooting bonus free throws, and Trey Galloway misses the front end. And again, I'm not blaming on Trey Galloway more than any other person. It's more just kind of the idea that when you zoom out and when you talk about the direction of the program, the direction of the season, you let enough opportunities slip away, seasons really start to kind of snowball on you.
Well, this has the feeling, I was trying to come up with an analogy, and I think what it feels like is if you're watching a TV show or you see a TV show that you haven't seen before, like on a streaming service, a lot of them do this, and they've posted all 10 episodes of the season, you get into it, and you're not done yet, then they cancel the show. And so you have to, but you want to watch the rest of the episodes, but they're not going anywhere. That's kind of feel like what this season feels like right now. That, this team is struggling, and like every opportunity they've had to sort of dig themselves out of it, they have just not met the moment, really.
Most of them. I mean, they met the thing is they sort of like a season, like any season is basically defined by a series of meeting a series of moments. They've met some of them, but then
more often than not lately.
Yeah. Lately, no.
All right, so we'll do that. And that's fair. And against team, Northwestern is a team that they should have beaten. Like, that's a bad loss. And that's a team that who's just more talented. And then this game, at home, a Maryland team that you've done well against in recent years, just couldn't muster. I still think they have a more talented roster, and it's just it's kind of you can sense. But give the fans credit; they did not turn on this team tonight, and it still didn't matter. And so, like, what? And the question that I think hasn't been answered, and it's kind of frustrating because you're kind of looking for like context this season. Woodson keeps saying he's got to get him the hump. We got to keep trying. It's like I've got to get more out of them. But like, what is preventing them from doing that? Like, it's like at this point, like, what, are you going to change anything? He talked about Malik Renew's injury, but that's not like the source of all the problems that this team has.
No.
And I think kind of reducing it to that.
He didn't. Let's be
a little
fair.
bit. In the question I asked about it, the struggles, that was all he talked about. But you're looking for more broader, like, well, like, you're 3 months into the season now, and it's like you're still talking about the same thing you're talking about in week 1. And it's like at some point, what is preventing it? Like, why can't you do that, or what is preventing you, or what can you change up to do that? And I just think there's a starting lack of answers for a team that you pull up the schedule now, not getting easier.
No, I mean, I pulled up the schedule because Kim Pomeroy. I mean, Indiana did hit the halfway mark in its Big Ten schedule today. Pomeroy has Indiana as the underdog in 8 of its remaining Big Ten games. It's worth saying, 2 of those games it's an underdog are basically coin flips. They're a 1-point underdog against UCLA and Ohio State at home. But the flip side of that is they're only a 2-point favorite against Penn State at home and Washington away. And, if you look at the win probabilities, all 4 of those games are somewhere between 45 and 55%. The point is those are all coin tosses. So, like, you can't even sort of say, well, they're the underdog, but they could. All they got to do is turn a couple of these close ones around. The next 4 are at Purdue, at Wisconsin, Michigan at home, at Michigan State. Even a generous reading of that probably still winds up with Indiana at 15-10 and 6-8 in the conference.
Oh, just the 4 shots.
Yeah, just these next 4. Never mind the 6 that come after that. And
is your generous reading them not winning a game?
No, my generous reading is them winning one of those 4. Okay. Because listen, all 3 road games are going to be tough. So's the home game. But I guess a more generous rating would be 500. But they are going to be a pronounced underdog in every one of those games. Winning any one of them in isolation would go against what will be expected according to the probabilities, according to the analytics, according to the betting lines, everything. So the idea of getting more than 1 win out of that stretch is a little bit tenuous, I guess. It is hard not to feel like when you couple, and I don't want to make grand pronouncements today on the direction of the program. I know that's where a lot of people's minds are. Number 1, we're not columnists. Number 2, there's still 10 more games to play in this season at least. But it is hard not to feel, certainly in the context of this season, like it is starting to get away from Indiana. And, that's a team that was I know you just flipped it over, sorry to go back, but that was a team that was 4-1 in the Big Ten, and they picked up a nice win away at Penn State.
And I think I saw a tweet that, they played the easiest Big Ten schedule through a certain point at this.
Yeah, they probably did. And, certainly one.
These losses, other than Illinois, but Illinois has been back and forth. Are pretty bad.
Yeah, no, listen, they're quad 1 losses. So from a purely NCAA tournament perspective,
they don't hurt you as well. But I'm saying
live with it. But
what this team is supposed to do, and what this team came at, the expectations coming into the
every
season.
right to think you could be with a top 4, top 5 team, at least in the Big Ten, comfortably in the NCAA tournament, probably a top 6 seed, maybe a top 4 seed. Iowa's not a game you should be losing, certainly the way you lost it. Northwestern's not a game you should be losing, again, the way you lost it. Maryland at home, you need to find a way to close out. It is hard not to feel like something is just sort of slipping away from this team. And I know you've hammered the consistency element of it. I think that's fair. But, I wrote this after the Northwestern game. There are teams for whom inconsistency becomes their defining trait because that's just what they are. And it is maybe starting to feel a little bit like that's just what Indiana is this winter.
Yeah. And, it's hard to trace because they do have some veterans in there and, guys with experience. And, it's not a team, Maryland's got these young guys where you think, you expect that kind of inconsistency because young players go back and forth and struggle in a game. But they talked about having the veterans on the floor tonight too. Ball's a guy that 5th season and has started all sorts of games. And
veterans who've been around here a long time, Anthony Leal.
Right, and I'm saying those guys plus
other Galloway, and Mackenzie Bacco, Malik Renew, and then also the guys you went out and got in the portal. The only one you would still, of the 8 that played tonight, The only one you would still consider kind of a young player is I think, to me, is Kanan Carlisle. You know, and I mean, I know he and Mbaka were the same sort of grade or whatever, but like Mbaka's been around here long enough to know the system, know the sets, know that, you know, whereas Carlisle.
And he only played 8 minutes. So
Carlisle's coming from a different team, and you can allow for that a little bit. But yeah, no, I mean, it is, again, like, it just, you know, this was Indiana's first home game since Illinois. And after that game, there was this sort of resolute message that was delivered. And I thought, you know, maturely, I thought genuinely, you know, willingly, honestly, from Luke Goody and Anthony Leal in particular, that, you know, we are going to turn this around. We are going to make this right. And then you had the Ohio State game that made you feel like maybe they can do that. Maybe, you know, maybe they can get some of that back.
Yeah.
And then these last two games have just kind of been, you know, just sort of a backslide that just makes you feel like that, especially, again, talking about where the schedule's going, like that may just be beyond this team. And however, you know, people love to throw NIL dollar rumors at it. And I get, like, but I even if we can have a slightly more, like, even if we can have like a conversation about it that divorces the NIL, like how much NIL costs, in the sense that everybody's using some NIL, everybody's in the portal, like, the, you know, in the most basic sense, everybody's trying to solve these problems. Like, every team is going to have these obstacles.
Right.
How to integrate new pieces, how to build roles around new players, whatever. You know, this one, even if, you know, even sort of moving away from the stuff that is just sort of like, you know, the cheap shells to lob over the wall.
Well, I think it's just, you know, and it is hard because, I mean, it's like, well, I mean, lower payroll teams win the titles in other professional sports. So
yeah,
that part doesn't make sense to me, but it does, I think, amplify the fans' frustration that you are a Yankees type of organization in college basketball where you have a higher payroll, and that this is what the final product looked like. You know, and so I think that amplifies the frustration over it.
And it should be said too, and it's not every fan.
But I don't think that's totally unfair. I don't think that's totally unfair.
No, I don't. And what I was going to add is, I mean, there is an extent anyway. I understand that some NILs, businesses, and you know, individual partnerships, like, there's an extent to which the fans are helping underwrite the payroll. Right, like, you know, like, it's I mean, so I'm not saying they get to stand there and say, I paid for this, it's unacceptable, now I get to say whatever I want or behave however I want. But I do think it almost kind of, in a way, makes it even a little bit more personal, in this sense of, you know, you ask for this support, you got this support, you do have what by all accounts is one of the, you know, most sort of robust NIL numbers in college basketball. And yet, you know, we're seeing some of the same regression. I mean, these are just projections. I understand that. But, like, you know, KenPom has Indiana finishing the regular season 19-14 and 18-12 in the conference. Indiana went 18-13 and 10-10 last year. If you wind up with a worse regular season record and a worse Big Ten record, I mean, it is hard. It is hard not to understand where people are coming from.
And I do think it plays into the discussion of where the program's going, because, like, if you do hit a reset, you're resetting and doing the same thing you did this year. Right? Yeah. You're just going through the portal and reloading, right? So, like, how do you expect the same group to produce different results with the same sort of strategy? Because they've had that's what they did this year. They needed the money to go invest in all these guys. They got the big, what was ranked second highest transfer class.
I don't remember.
Whatever.
I mean, yeah.
But a top 5, I think. I mean, 24/7, I thought it was number 2. But either way, so I mean, like, if the goal is to next year blow it all up and restart with the same coach, like, well, he's done this strategy and it did not produce better results. And I think that sort of plays into sort of these discussions of, like, well, what direction are we going? What are we going to do? Because, you know, you're not recruiting a ton. I mean, you know, I know they got to commit one on Friday. I'm not going to pronounce his name right. What was the kid's name?
I think it's Heron Zerno, I believe.
So you got 2 kids locked in for next year, but, like, I mean, the high school recruiting is not sort of like your savior here, because you're not reloading with talent. And so I think that plays in sort of the discussions and plays in, like I said, the fan frustration, where it's like, we bought a roster that was really supposed to be good, and now we've like you said, stayed the same, regressed either way. I mean, you know, the record's going to be not an improvement, it looks like, unless something drastically changes.
And it might. I mean, it's still possible. Indiana does still have 10 Big Ten games to play. But,
And if
certainly
they did that and they went on a roll against the teams they're going to face, I mean, hey, tip your cap and say they
Right.
figured it out, right?
And obviously,
and then Mike Woodson will say, like, look, this against our best stretch, we figured it out, and that's what I did.
Yeah.
And here's what I did, and here's why. Here's where this program is going from here. But that's a tough ask.
That's evidence.
You've made it. You've dug a big hole.
That's evidence of things unseen.
Right.
At this point.
Yes.
We'll leave it there. He's Mike Neislich. I'm Zach Osterman. We'll come back sometime midweek to podcast. We'll also probably, I want to pull in your thoughts on maybe putting together a podcast looking at the football depth chart. I know Indiana's still got a couple irons in the fire in the portal. Maybe we'll wait for those. Maybe we'll at least just kind of rough it out.
Oh, I think we got signed. I mean, maybe signing day would be a good after signing day would be a good time to do it. I mean, I know
they're only going to sign I guess they might sign some transfers.
The one quarterback, but I know they're not going to do a lot. But it's a kind of good mark to say, well, now we're looking. They did announce. We should mention football team was here today. They got a big ovation, and the spring game was announced for April 19th
at noon.
At noon, so not a prime time spring game.
No,
so
it's afternoon.
So is that not then the Little Five weekend?
No, it's the weekend before.
Before the Little Five. Okay. So you're my Little Five guy. You're my source, my Little Five source.
You are. I am your Little Five source. He's Mike Neislich. I'm Zach Osterman. This has been Mind Your Banners post game for Maryland 79, Indiana 78. Hoosiers are 14-7. They're 5-5. They have the week off before they are at Purdue on Friday night. We'll probably not do one of these after that game because, frankly, it will be very late by the time it's over. But thank you all for watching, for listening. We'll talk to you soon.